Please be seated.
Veuillez vous asseoir.
We resume our session. And before I hand the floor to the international co-prosecutor,
avant de donner la parole au co-procureur international,
the Chamber would like to inform the public that if you wish to file a motion to the trial chamber,
les membres du public désirant soumettre une requête à la chambre de première instance,
please file your motion pursuant to the internal rules of the
Cette requête doit être déposée conformément aux règles intérieures des CETC.
Now the chamber would like to hand the floor to the international co-prosecutor to continue with the
au co-procureur international pour la suite des déclarations liminaires de l'accusation. Vous avez la parole.
Mr. President, Your Honors, civil party TCCP 98 is a woman from Kratz Jama. She said in an interview that in 1978, another group of Khmer Rouge from the Southwest Zone came to where I now lived. They searched out the Cham so they could wipe out every last one of us. The 8 members of my family were all killed. I was the sole exception because I disguised myself as being from another race. In this case, in this trial, Trial 2-2, there are 2 charges of genocide. Genocide of Cham Muslims and genocide of the Vietnamese. Genocide is a crime under international law. It's one of many serious crimes in international law. And these crimes do not have a hierarchy. There's no ranking of one being more serious than the other. Genocide has a very precise technical meaning in law. And that is, genocide are certain acts done with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, an ethnic, racial, religious, or national group. And those acts can be killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to the group, creating conditions of life that could lead to the destruction of the group, imposing measures to prevent births or transferring children. And it's important in the definition to recall the words that it's in whole or in part, and that it's required for genocide that the acts be directed against an ethnic, racial, religious, or national group. It cannot be a political group. It can't be an ethnic or an economic group. So for that reason, new people, bourgeois, political opponents, these do not qualify as groups under the definition of genocide. Intellectuals do not qualify as a group under the definition of genocide. It's important to keep in mind, of course, in this case, the great majority of the victims, the great majority of the crimes that will be covered in this trial were committed exactly against these groups of Khmer people because of their economic class, because they were classified as new people, because they were intellectuals, because they were perceived as potential political opponents of the regime. And all of these are covered in the counts in which Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea will face trial in this case, including, most importantly, the crime of exterminations. But in this case, the evidence will also prove each of the elements of genocide against the two groups, the Cham and the Vietnamese. The jurisprudence in international law says that while it's not necessary that you kill everyone or even intend to kill everyone, it's necessary that there be an intent to destroy the group in whole or in part, and that this must be a substantial part. It must be a part that could affect the survival of the group. In the first Srebrenica appeal judgment in the trial of General Krstić, the appeal chamber of the ICTY said you can look at three different factors: the absolute number of those killed, the relative number, in other words, what percentage of the group was killed, and also it's important to look at the prominence of the individuals targeted, the group targeted. In paragraph 12 of that judgment, the appeal chamber said if a specific part of the group is emblematic of the overall group or is essential to its survival, that may support a finding that the part qualifies as substantial. In two other cases, Jelačić in paragraph 82 of the judgment, trial judgment, and Sikarica in paragraph 65 of the defense motion to dismiss, specifically hold that and recognize that targeting the leadership of the group, that can be an important means of proving that it was a substantial part of the group that was intended to be destroyed. It's also important, looking at genocide, to distinguish the specific intent that's needed from the motive. The intent must be to destroy the group. It doesn't matter if the motive is because I want to maintain power, because I believe they're my political enemies. In Jelačić, paragraph 49, the chamber held the personal motive of the perpetrator of the crime of genocide may be, for example, political advantage or power. That does not preclude a finding of genocide. So if the Cham or the Vietnamese were targeted, as they were in this case, because the accused and the other senior leaders of the Khmer Rouge viewed them as potential enemies, that certainly does not preclude a finding of genocide, because the evidence will show they intended to destroy them in whole or in part. One witness that will testify, TCW 641, said in a statement, "But I was told that Cham people were of a different race and had to be smashed, that if we kept them, they would rebel against us sometime." Another witness, TCW 813, said, "We were not allowed to obey Cham religion and to speak Cham language. Women were required to have a very short haircut. We were forced to have collective meals and to eat pork. No explanation was made by the Khmer Rouge, and those who refused such practices would be killed." So it's not critical that the intent was to destroy, to kill every single member of the group, as long as it was to destroy a substantial part that would affect their survival. Professor Ben Kiernan, in his book, in Table 4, the document is on our case file E3-1593, estimates that there were about 250,000 Cham at the start of the regime in democratic Kampuchea, and about 90,000 perished during the regime, 36%. Another study that's on the case file by Issa Osman, E3-1833, estimates a much higher number at the start of the regime, about 700,000, and he estimates as much as 450,000, 500,000 could have been killed, up to 70%. What's important is what the last witness that I just mentioned read out.
Ce qui est important, et je fais ici
Even if
référence
the
au dernier
intent was
témoin
not
dont
to
j'ai lu la
kill
déclaration,
every
même si
single
l'intention
cham,
n'était pas
the
de
intent
tuer
was to destroy
chacun
the
des
group.
chams, l'intention était de détruire le groupe.
And the intent was done in two ways.
Et cette
First,
intention a été
you'll
mise en
see
application
from
de
the
deux façons.
evidence
Vous verrez
that locations where
d'abord
chams were
que les
particularly
endroits où
concentrated,
les
particularly two villages along the
chams se
Mekong,
concentraient, c'est-à-dire deux villages
One of them
le long
was in
du
the
Mekong,
eastern zone,
le premier dans la zone
Krokchma,
est, Krokchma,
and one
et
was in
l'autre
the center zone,
ou dans la zone du
called
centre,
Mia.
Kongmir.
In both of these
Dans
locations,
ces
attempts were made
deux
to wipe
villages,
out, to kill all of the
on
cham.
a
In
essayé
these locations where
d'éliminer,
the
de tuer tous
cham were
les chams.
concentrated.
Et c'était des endroits où les chams se
But
concentraient.
also, as the last witness I read out,
Mais aussi, comme l'a dit le dernier témoin, que
those
j'ai
who were
mentionné,
killed, who were targeted,
ceux
was
qui
anyone
étaient
who
tués ou
would
qui avaient été pris pour cible,
insist on
c'était toute
maintaining their
personne
cham
qui
identity.
entendait
Those who
maintenir son
insisted
identité
on
de cham.
practicing their religion.
Ceux qui insistaient
Islam.
à pratiquer leur religion.
Those who insisted on speaking their language.
Ceux qui souhaitaient parler leur
They
langue.
would and could be
Ces
killed
gens pouvaient,
for simply
étaient
maintaining
tués
their identity.
pour avoir voulu
If you kill
maintenir
all
leur
of
identité.
people of a
Si
group
vous
who
tuez
have
tous
the
ceux au sein du
self-identity
groupe
of the group,
qui
you
ont
destroy
l'identité
the
du
group.
groupe, vous détruisez le groupe.
The group can't survive
Le groupe ne saurait
if they no
survivre.
longer have a language in common,
S'il n'a
religion in common,
plus sa
customs in
langue,
common.
ou sa
If
religion,
all
ses
those
coutumes.
who practice
Si tous ceux
and maintain that identity are
qui
killed,
pratiquent
the
et
group will
maintiennent
be
cette
destroyed.
identité sont tués, le groupe en son
If you
entier
look back at
sera
Table 1
éliminé.
of Professor Kiernan's
Au tableau
book,
1 dans l'ouvrage du professeur
he also points out
on
how
peut voir
religious leaders of the Cham
comment
were particularly
les
targeted.
dirigeants
You see
religieux
this on your screen.
étaient pris pour cible, vous le
The
verrez à
community leaders, the Hakem,
Les,
there were about
Hakem,
113
les
in
dirigeants
75,
communautaires,
and only 20
Il y
survived
en
the
avait
regime,
113
over
en
80%
75,
killed.
seuls 20 ont
Their
survécu,
deputies,
plus de 80% ont été tués.
226 at the
Leurs
start,
adjoints, 226 au
25
début
at
du
the end of the
régime,
regime.
25 à la fin du régime.
Haji, that is people who have made
Haji,
the
c'est-à-dire
Hajj to
ceux
Mecca,
qui ont
which would tend
fait
to
le
be
Hajj,
the
qui
most
sont allés à la
religious
Mecque,
and the most prominent members because they
qui
have
sont
to have
les
money
plus
to do
religieux
that, be prosperous.
et les plus importants du sein du
So
groupe,
these
qui
most
doivent
prominent
être
religious
prospères,
members
qui
of the
doivent avoir l'argent pour se rendre à la
community, the
Mecque.
Haji,
C'est donc les membres
he
les plus
estimates
prospères
that
du
over
groupe. Il
1,000
estime qu'il y en avait plus de 100. Plus de
were
1000
there in 1975 in democratic Kampuchea,
1975
and
en
only about
Kampuchea
30
démocratique, et seuls
survived the regime.
30
So about
survécu.
97% were killed.
97% de ce groupe.
The Vietnamese genocide
Le
was different.
génocide des Vietnamiens était
And
d'une autre
you'll
nature.
find from the evidence that the policy on the
Et vous
Vietnamese
verrez
in Cambodia
dans les dépositions que les
evolved.
politiques
It
contre
changed
les
during the
ennemis.
regime. In the early
Ça,
years of the
le
regime, the
Cambodge
policy
démocratique a
was
évolué.
simply
Au
to
début,
transfer them, to expel them to Vietnam,
La
get
politique
them out
était
of
de
the
les transférer,
country,
de les expulser vers le
sometimes to
Vietnam, de les
exchange
faire
them
sortir
for
du pays,
Khmer
de les
Krom from
échanger
Vietnam.
pour des
But in the latter
Khmer
years, in
Krom.
1977,
Mais à la fin,
1978,
en 78,
the policy changed,
la politique
and it became
était
simply
modifiée.
to kill
Il s'agissait tout
any
simplement de
Vietnamese that
tuer
could be found in
tout
democratic
Vietnamien
Kampuchea.
dans le territoire du Kampuchea démocratique.
And this isn't something that was decided in individual villages by
pas
foot
quelque chose qui a
soldiers
été
or
décidé par
small
des soldats
commanders.
de
It
rang
was
inférieur,
incited
ou des
from the
petits
very
commandants dans le
center of the
village.
regime. It was the policy of the
émanait
regime.
du centre du régime.
If you look at E3
Au
742,
document
this
E3
is the
bar
revolutionary
742,
flag, the party's
exemplaire des
internal
tendances révolutionnaires,
publication to its
c'est
cadre
l'organe
from
du
April
parti pour ses cadres,
1977.
les numéros
You see
d'avril
in there, there's this
1977.
exhortation.
Vous verrez
They
ici que l'on
incite their
exhorte les
cadre.
membres.
It says the CIA and their agents, the KGB and their agents,
Il
the
décrit
territory
les CIA, leurs agents, le KGB,
swallowing
leurs agents,
UN,
et les avaleurs de
talks
territoire,
about them
les Yuan.
sneaking into our party,
On dit qu'ils
our army, and
s'infiltrent dans
our
notre
people.
parti, notre armée, notre peuple.
And then finally says
Et finalement,
it is imperative
il est
to whip up the
impératif
people,
de
to sweep more of them
d'encourager
clean and make
peuple
things
pour
permanently clean.
nettoyer
And we
de
know
façon
the
permanente.
vocabulary of the Khmer Rouge.
On connaît
Sweep
le
and
vocabulaire
make clean
des
means to
Khmer
kill.
rouges. Nettoyer, cela veut dire
If we
tuer.
look at another report sent from the
Un autre
Northwest
rapport
Zone
envoyé par la zone nord-ouest
to the leaders in Phnom
aux
Penh,
dirigeants
and this is
Phnom
from May 1978.
de mai 1978.
They asked a question of the senior leaders.
Pose une question aux
The
dirigeants.
question was, Yuan
La question était la
with
suivante.
Khmer
Les Yuan
spouses and
qui
the
ont des
half-breed
épouses
Khmer Yuan. The meeting would like to ask Ankar
les
870 what to
métis
do
Khmer
them,
Yuan.
what to do with them. Whatever Ankar
Nous
decides, please give
Nous voulons
instruction.
savoir, nous demandons à Ankar
We know that
870
Ankar 870
qu'est-ce
means
que
the
l'on en
very,
fait.
very senior
ce
leadership.
que décidera
of
l'Ankar,
the Khmer
donner
Rouge.
des
How
instructions.
was that
Nous savons
policy
qu'Ankar
implemented?
870, ce sont les hauts dirigeants.
One witness you'll hear from TCW 820
Que cela signifie-t-il?
said
Quelle
the
est-
ethnic
plutôt, comment cette
Vietnamese
politique a-t-elle
were
été
being
mise en
arrested
œuvre?
and killed.
TCW 820 a dit
Cadres had
que l'on
announced
tuait, on
that if the
arrêtait
father
les
was
Vietnamiens.
Vietnamese, only
que
the
les cadres
father
ont
would be
annoncé que
taken away
si
and
le père
killed.
était vietnamien, seul le père serait
But if the
emmené
mother
et
was
tué. Mais si la
Vietnamese,
mère était vietnamienne,
they would take the
il
mother
fallait
and all the
prendre la
children
mère et
and
tous
kill
les
them,
enfants et les tuer,
because the children
car les
suck the
enfants
milk of the mother.
boivent le lait de la mère.
Similarly, TCW 95
De même,
said
TCW
no one was
95 a
left
dit que
behind if they were connected with the Yuan.
On ne laissait personne
the husband
s'ils
was
étaient reliés
connected,
au
they
Yuan.
took
Si
the
le
husband.
mari était relié
The
au Yuan,
wife,
il
they
prenait
took the wife
le mari. L'épouse,
and
il
the
prenait
children too.
l'épouse et les enfants.
TCW 949 said in
TCW
1978,
a
I
dit
heard
qu'en
the sounds of
1978,
people
j'ai
screaming.
entendu des cris.
I saw the Khmer Rouge
J'ai
kill
vu
people with
les Khmer
bamboo
Rouges tuer les
clubs
gens avec
about
des
1
bâtons
meter
de
long.
d'environ
They
1
asked,
mètre.
"Are
Ils
all
ont
of you
demandé,
Yuan?"
êtes-vous tous des Yuan?
And then they shouted,
Et puis ils ont
kill them
crié,
quickly so we can go and
tuez-les
take a
rapidement
rest.
pour que l'on puisse aller se reposer.
As for the children,
Quant
they
aux
were
enfants,
swung and beaten against the
Ils ont
tree of
été
a coconut,
frappés
the trunk of a
contre
coconut
le
tree.
tronc d'un cocotier.
TCW 868 said, as I estimated, there were about
D'après mon estimation,
600
il y
to
avait
700
environ 600 à 700
Vietnamese
Vietnamiens
killed at that
qui ont été
time
tués à ce
in
moment-là.
the location where he was.
Là où il était.
Said they killed
Il a
entire
dit, ils ont
families,
tué des
men,
familles
women, and
entières, des
children.
femmes, des enfants, des
I
des
can
hommes.
still remember the girl who had been in
Je me
my
souviens
mobile
encore
unit,
la fille qui était
whom
dans
they
mon
had
unité
taken
mobile,
to
qu'ils
study
avaient
sewing.
envoyé
They cut open
étudier
her
la
abdomen
couture.
while she was alive.
Ils lui ont ouvert l'abdomen alors qu'elle était
And
toujours
going back to Table 4 of Kiernan's
On en
book
revient au tableau
about
4
the survival
dans
rates of
l'ouvrage
various
de
groups during the
Kiernan
Democratic
sur la survie
Kampuchea
des différents groupes
regime, you see that
sous le régime
he
du
estimates there were
démocratique. On voit qu'il
10,000
estime qu'il y avait environ 10 000
Vietnamese in urban location,
Vietnamiens dans les
10,000
zones
in rural
urbaines, 10
locations
000
in
dans les zones rurales en
1975.
1975.
None of them survived
Et qu'aucun
the
n'a
DK
survécu.
regime. None of them. Now,
Aucun.
this is confirmed
Il
by the
s'agit
CPK itself.
quelque chose qui a été
If you
confirmé
go
par
to
le
the
PCK
revolutionary flag
lui-même.
from April
Lisons les
1978,
temps révolutionnaire d'avril
it
1978.
states,
Il y est écrit.
and now, how about the Yuan?
Qu'en est-il des Yuan?
There are no Yuan in
Il n'y a
Kampuchean territory.
Pas de Yuan en territoire
Formerly, there were
cambodgien.
nearly 1
Avant,
million of
il y
them.
en avait presque 1 million.
Now, there is not one seed of
Il n'y en a
them
même
to
plus
be found.
une graine.
So, Your Honors, genocide and all of the crimes my national co-prosecutor
Génocide
described,
et les crimes que ma consoeur
all
a
of these
décrits,
crimes were the result
tous ces crimes
of a policy.
sont le résultat d'une
These crimes
politique.
were done systematically,
Il
not
s'agissait de
randomly,
crimes systématiques, pas
not
au hasard.
as individual initiatives
Il ne
in
s'agissait pas
villages.
d'initiatives individuelles dans les villages.
These crimes were all, they may not have been the objective,
Ces crimes
the final
n'étaient peut-être
objective
pas
that the Khmer Rouge were seeking.
l'objectif final des Khmer Rouges.
Their final objective was their
L'objectif final était
ideology, this perverted
l'idéologie,
ideology,
cette
this idea of a
idéologie
rapid
perverse,
revolution,
une
agrarian revolution,
accélérée, une
and
révolution agraire
to maintain
rapide,
their own power,
et
to
aussi
keep the senior
d'assurer leur
leadership
propre
in
pouvoir,
power.
de s'assurer que
To
les
do
hauts
that,
dirigeants
they chose
gardent le
these
pouvoir.
means.
Et pour ce faire, ils ont choisi
Use these
d'utiliser les
crimes
moyens que j'ai décrits.
to
Ils ont
justify,
eu recours à ces
to
crimes
achieve the ends
pour
that they sought.
atteindre
And
leurs objectifs.
how did these policies get communicated down to the cadre
Comment
all
ces
around the
politiques ont-elles
country
été
in
communiquées au
villages?
cadre partout dans le pays, dans les villages?
We're not saying that every single killing was ordered
Nous ne disons
by
pas
Nguyen
que
Chia, Khieu Samphan, or
Nguyen
the
Chia, Khieu Samphan
senior
et les
leadership,
autres dirigeants
but these
ont
policies
ordonné
were
chacun de ces
communicated.
crimes, mais c'est les politiques qui ont été
Some orders were
communiquées.
given to kill,
Certains
and the
ordres
policies were given to seek out these
exécutés ont été
enemies,
donnés,
to
et les ordres ont été
persecute,
donnés
to kill.
pour chasser
Who
les ennemis,
communicated these
de les
policies?
tuer.
Well, the
Qui l'a
person in
communiqué?
charge of
Ces
propaganda and
politiques.
education of the
La personne
cadres was Nguyen
responsable
Chia.
de la propagande et de l'éducation des cadres, c'était Nguyen Chia.
And the person who had the role of being the public face of
Et
the Khmer
la personne
Rouge,
qui était
both
le visage
internationally
public des Khmer
and
Rouges
within
dans la
Cambodia,
internationale
was
du
Khieu
Cambodge,
Samphan.
c'était Khieu Samphan.
What all of these crimes have in common, and
Le
all
point
of the
commun
policies of the
entre
Khmer
tous ces
Rouge have in
crimes,
common,
Le point commun entre
is
toutes
that
ces
in order to
politiques des
achieve
Khmer Rouges,
their idea,
que pour
their vision of the Cambodia that
obtenir
they sought,
le résultat, cette
they
vision
were
du
willing to
Cambodge
do
qu'ils avaient,
anything to
ils étaient prêts
sacrifice
à tout
any individual
sacrifier
and to commit any
quiconque
crime.
et étaient prêts à
against
commettre
those
n'importe quel
individuals.
crime pour pouvoir
The
atteindre
individual
l'objectif.
did not matter, as Nguyen Chia
L'individu
himself
n'avait
has
aucune
said.
importance, comme Nguyen Chia lui-même l'a dit.
Watch your screen, please.
Veuillez regarder l'écran.
បើទុកពួកនឹងអានឹងសម្រាប់ទៀត
If
ស្ដាល់ខ្លួនណាបើតែតែមាន
because the individual do
Si
have a
on les
sentiment,
garde,
but I make it clear the difference between individual
mais je fais ici une différence entre
and
l'individu et le groupe.
Because I myself, I think of the nation and put aside the individual.
Je pense ici à la nation et je mets de côté l'individu.
Are you sorry for those who were killed?
Avez-vous des remords pour ceux qui ont été
I
tués?
have no regrets.
Je n'ai aucun regret.
Your Honor, these policies of being willing to
Donc
sacrifice
cette
and
politique
kill
d'être prêt à sacrifier et à tuer
Cambodians
les Cambodgiens
were clear even before the Khmer Rouge
était
took
évident avant
power,
même que les Khmer
to
Rouges
kill
prennent le
whenever
pouvoir,
convenient to maintain their power.
de tuer quand il
But it was
était
absolutely
approprié pour garder
clear
le pouvoir.
how the individual would be sacrificed once the
était clair
Khmer Rouge
que
seized Phnom
l'individu
Penh
était être
and this
sacrifié
massive,
quand les Khmer
inhumane
Rouges
evacuations
ont pris
of the cities took place.
le pouvoir et qu'ils
It
ont
was clear
évacué
then
en
that
masse
the
les
rights
villes.
of individuals
Il était évident
would
donc
no longer
que les
exist,
droits des individus
and that the
n'existeraient
state would exercise
que
the
l'État
rights of ownership
aurait
over
le
all
droit de
Cambodians,
propriété, de
and
possession
that they would
sur
be
tous
denied
les
all
Cambodgiens
fundamental
et
freedoms.
que l'on nierait aux
Most
Cambodgiens
important
leurs libertés les plus
To
fondamentales.
the Khmer Rouge trying to maintain complete control of the society is that they set out to destroy the most important
Preuve est que les
values
Khmer Rouges ont essayé de
of
détruire les
traditional Khmer
valeurs
society,
les plus importantes de la
And those
société
were religion,
traditionnelle khmer, c'est-à-dire la
king,
religion,
and
le
family.
roi et la famille.
Do Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan
Khieu
want
Samphan et
your
Nuon
honors
Chea
in this court and the
veulent-ils
people
vraiment
watching to believe
faire croire
that
au
monks around the country
tribunal et au public que les
disrobed
moines de
on their
partout dans le
own
pays se sont
voluntarily
défroqués de
during the
façon
period of
volontaire
democratic Kampuchea,
de leur propre
that this wasn't a result of the
chef à
policy?
l'époque et que ce n'était pas le résultat d'une politique.
We can look at one CPK document,
Si l'on
should be on your screen,
lit un document du
E399 from
PCK
September
E3
1975,
du 22 septembre
where the party is
1975.
congratulating itself.
Le parti se
It
félicite.
says most of the monks, from
Il est
90
écrit
to
que
95%
la
of
majeure
them,
partie des moines, de
abandoned
90
their
à
monkhood.
95% d'entre eux, ont
pagodas, which are the core foundations for the existence
quitté
of
l'ordre.
the
Les
monkhood,
pagodes
were
qui
abandoned.
sont le fondement même de
People
l'existence
have no longer
de
gone to
des-
pagoda. They no longer offer
l'ordre ont été
alms.
abandonnés. Les personnes ne vont plus à la pagode.
Going down a bit, we assume that 99
Ils font
to
plus d'offrandes.
95%
Et
of the
nous
monks and
présumons que
Buddhist
entre
practices
90 et
will no
95%
longer
des moines
exist.
et des pratiques bouddhistes
So this
n'existeront
special
plus.
layer of the
Et
society
donc cette couche
will
particulière
no
de la
longer
société
cause any worry.
ne sera
The
plus
worry
une
to
source de
them
préoccupation.
was loyalty to someone other than the Khmer Rouge.
Il s'agissait ici d'une loyauté envers quelqu'un d'autre que les Khmer Rouges.
For years now, even leading up to this trial, Khieu
Pendant
Samphan
des
and Nuon
années
Chea
avant la tenue de ce procès, Khieu
have
Samphan et
practiced their
Nuon Chea
excuses and justifications
ont donné des excuses
for their role
et ont justifié
in
leur
these horrendous
rôle
crimes
qu'ils ont
inflicted
joué
on
dans
the
ces
Cambodian
horribles
people.
crimes commis.
And I want to address
peuple
briefly
cambodgien.
some of these excuses and
J'aimerais
justifications that
rappeler
they have
certaines
given.
de ces excuses, certains de ces justificatifs qu'ils ont évoqués.
Khieu Samphan
Khieu
says,
Samphan
I had no
a dit, je
power.
n'avais aucun pouvoir.
He even told the VOA
Il a même
in an
dit
interview
à
in
Voice of
2007,
America dans un entretien en
I was
2007,
not a Khmer Rouge
je
leader,
n'étais pas un dirigeant Khmer Rouge.
which is a rather pathetic
Pitoyable.
statement for a man who was the head of
Venant
state
d'un homme
of
qui était le
Democratic
chef d'État
Kampuchea,
du Kampuchea
who
démocratique,
joined the Communist Party in the
qui a rejoint le Parti
1960s,
communiste dans
was
les
a
années
member of the
60,
Central
était
Committee
membre du comité central
in
en
1976 and
1976
stayed with the regime all the way up
et
to the
il est
end
resté
in
avec le régime jusqu'à la
1998.
fin,
He
jusqu'en
stayed with the Khmer
98.
Rouge.
Il est resté avec les Khmer Rouges.
He says he had no power,
Il a dit
but
qu'il
on
n'avait
another
aucun pouvoir,
occasion,
mais plus
in his
tard,
interview in Facing Genocide,
dans Facing
he
Genocide,
acknowledged
il
how
reconnaît
important his position was. He said,
l'importance
quote,
de sa
"My
position. Il a
image
dit, mon
and my
image
name
et mon nom
represented Cambodia,
représentaient le Cambodge.
because that was the importance of being the head of state,
C'était là
especially in a regime
l'importance d'un rôle de chef
where
d'État,
Pol Pot
surtout dans un régime
tried to
où
hide
Pol
his
Pot a
identity
essayé
and
de
keep
cacher
such a
son
low
identité
profile.
et de rester dans la
So
clandestinité.
he was the person representing,
C'était donc lui
the
qui
Khmer Rouge, both
représentait
internationally
les
and
Khmer Rouges,
nationally.
tant à l'international qu'au
and he told the
niveau
VOA that
du
as
Cambodge.
president,
Et il a
I
dit,
believe I represented
VOA en
all
2007, en
Khmers.
tant que
I
président,
fulfilled
je
my duties
représentais tous les
to the
Khmers et je
nation.
me suis acquitté de mes responsabilités envers la nation.
Well, he certainly was active. He was living and working
Oui,
with
il
the
était
other
actif, il
leaders. He was a
travaillait
member
avec
of the
les autres
Central
dirigeants,
Committee.
il vivait
As
avec
we've
eux, il
said
était membre
many
du
times
comité
before,
central.
we have
Et comme nous l'avons
19
dit plusieurs
surviving
fois, 19
records of meetings of the Standing
comptes-rendus
Committee,
de réunions du
the
comité
single most
permanent,
powerful,
qui était
very exclusive group
l'organe le plus exclusif et le
of
plus puissant
the leadership, the decision-making body of the Khmer Rouge regime, and Khieu Samphan attended 16 of those, 84% of those meetings. His name is on the minutes. Khieu Samphan also brags about the contribution he made to the defeat of the Lon Nol government, about how he served the revolution, served in contributing to that defeat. Well, then, how does he able to say that he's able to make a contribution before 1975, and then once the Khmer Rouge reaches power, he no longer has any power? He no longer can make a contribution? In fact, after the Khmer Rouge reached power, Khieu Samphan's authority only grew. In 1976, he was made a full member, full rights member of the Central Committee. And in 1976, he replaced Prince Sihanouk as the head of state, the president of the Presidium of the Democratic Kampuchea. And we know that in 1977, after the arrest of Dun, Khieu Samphan became the sole member of Office 870, the party's nerve center that was coordinating with the regions and coordinating all of these arrests that led to executions. And the records show that Khieu Samphan gave speeches, he spoke to cadre, on occasions he spoke to tens of thousands of them. He met with foreign ambassadors and delegations. He represented Cambodia abroad. And what did he do in all of these public appearances and opportunities to speak and talk about what was happening in democratic Kampuchea? What he did in all of them is lie and hide the crimes of the Khmer Rouge. If you just look at the speech he gave on the third anniversary of the Khmer Rouge victory, 17 April 1978, one document estimates 20,000 people were in the audience. He said, quote, "We have achieved our plan for food production." Khieu Samphan said that while people were starving to death in Cambodian villages. He said, "Our medicine meets the needs of the people." Khieu Samphan said that while people were dying in Cambodia because of lack of medicine and medical care. And finally he said, "Our people are delighted with the development of our collectivist regime." While people were being enslaved in cooperatives and seeing the family members starved and killed, he told the cadre in the world, the people of Cambodia were delighted with the regime. Your Honor, there's somebody in this courtroom who once said, quote, "This movement," referring to the Khmer Rouge, "committed more violence than any revolutionary movement the world has ever known." It wasn't me that said that. It wasn't my co-prosecutor, Her Excellency Che Liang, that said that. Rather, it was Khieu Samphan. He said that in a letter he wrote to his compatriots 29 December 2003. He acknowledges that while he was president, this movement committed more violence than any revolutionary movement the world had ever known. But at other times, in 2007, in his interview for this video, Facing Genocide, he claimed he didn't hear about the massacres until 1998. Until 1998 is when the movement finally completely collapsed. Now, this would be funny if it wasn't such a serious topic. This is a man, without a doubt, both of these men, highly intelligent. Khieu Samphan, very educated, a PhD, speaks foreign languages, formerly a publisher of a newspaper, intellectual. And he wants you to believe that he's the only man in Cambodia that didn't learn about the killings until 1998, that he didn't know what was going on in his own country. During the regime, Khieu Samphan lived and ate with the leaders. Nuon Chea has even said that he used to eat dinner, eat regularly with Pol Pot, and that Khieu Samphan frequently would join them. Khieu Samphan traveled abroad and he met foreigners, he met ambassadors within Cambodia. He traveled with the king when the king was not being detained. He managed the king. He knew the king was being detained against his will, separated from his family. but he claims he didn't know
et prétend
anything about
qu'il
the
ne
crimes
savait rien des crimes
until 1998.
et qu'il l'a su en 1998.
And he told the VOA in
Il a dit
2007,
à VOA en 2007,
oh, the executions were all
toutes les
Pol Pot's
exécutions,
idea.
c'était l'idée de Pol Pot.
Well, how would Khieu Samphan know that the execution were Pol Pot's idea?
Peut-il savoir que les exécutions
He claims he
étaient
didn't know
l'idée de
anything
Pol Pot,
about these
puisqu'il
killings.
prétend ne rien savoir de ces
How does he
massacres?
know that the orders came from
Comment
Pol
sait-il
Pot?
que c'est Pol Pot qui a donné l'ordre?
He knows because he
Il
and
le
Pol
sait,
Pot would talk
car
about
lui et
these.
Pol Pot
Because they discussed these orders and these killings and the executions in their meals together, in the standing committee meetings. That's how he knows Pol Pot
pendant les repas, dans leurs réunions.
Ordered killings. He told the investigating judge of this court,
Il a dit au juge
quote,
d'instruction,
I observed
je
that
cite,
some members of the Central Committee
j'ai remarqué
disappeared, one after the
certains
other.
membres du comité central ont disparu l'un après
And then he
l'autre.
said, quote,
Puis il a dit, je
in
cite,
relation to the disappearance of the members
au
of the
sujet de
Central Committee and the
disparition des
Standing
membres du
Committee,
comité central et du comité
everyone
permanent,
seemed to approve,
tout le monde
but I did
semblait
not know the
être
extent
d'accord,
or the scope of the
mais je ne
arrest.
connaissais pas la portée,
What
l'échelle de
is,
ces arrestations.
let's think about that statement he made.
Arrêtons-nous
He's saying
là-dessus
he's aware
un moment. Il
that
dit
the
qu'il
members,
a
the high
connaissance
leaders of the
du
Khmer
fait que
Rouge
les
from the
hauts
Central
dirigeants des
Committee
Khmer
and
Rouge au
Standing
comité central et
Committee
au comité
are
permanent
being removed, and that everyone,
sont
in other words, the
disparaissent,
remaining members,
et que tout le
seem
monde,
to
ceux
approve.
qui restent, semblent être d'accord ou
Well,
approuvent
that
cette
is
disparition.
clearly implies that Khieu Samphan himself voiced
lui-même,
absolutely
Khieu
no
Samphan,
objection
n'a sûrement
to
pas
these
soulevé
arrests,
d'objection à ces
that he
arrestations,
was one of those who
et
seemed to
qu'il faisait
approve
partie de
of the
ceux qui
arrests.
ont approuvé.
Even Khieu Samphan's own subordinate in Office 870
Même les
was
subordonnés,
arrested
même le subordonné de
and under
Khieu Samphan au bureau
torture by
870 a été arrêté et
in
torturé,
S21. He implicated Khieu Samphan.
a mis Khieu Samphan en cause.
Nuon Chea, when he was
Nuon Chea,
brought that interview,
Quand on lui a
that
remis
confession,
ses aveux,
by Duik,
quand
he
Duik a
warned
remis à
Duik
Nuon Chea
not
ses
to
aveux,
collect any more information or
Duik a
record
dit à
any
Duik
more information
de ne
implicating
pas
Khieu Samphan.
reprendre ou de ne pas
Of course,
enregistrer d'autres informations
Nuon
à
Chea,
propos de Khieu
who
Samphan.
regularly ate with Khieu
Évidemment,
Samphan, who
Nuon
lived
Chea, qui mangeait régulièrement
near
avec Khieu
him,
Samphan, qui vivait
worked with him, would
lui
have
qui
told
travaillait
Khieu
avec lui,
Samphan about
aurait
S21 and Duik, and the fact that he himself had even been named under torture in one of these confessions.
dans la torture, dans certains de ses aveux.
There's another strategy that both Khieu Samphan and Nuon
Une
Chea
autre
have used,
stratégie employée tant par Khieu Samphan que Nuon Chea.
and it's certainly not the first time in my career as
Et
a
ce ne sera pas la
prosecutor
première
that I've
fois
seen
dans ma
that.
carrière de
It's very
procureur que j'ai
common,
vu une telle stratégie.
and that is for the
C'est assez
criminals that
courant.
remain
C'est-à-dire que les
to
criminels
blame the dead man.
qui ont survécu,
So in this case, both
de
Khieu
jeter la pierre
Samphan
aux morts.
and Nuon Chea,
C'est-à-dire que Khieu Samphan
they want
et
to
Nuon
put the
Chea
whole blame
veulent
on Pol Pot.
dire
Oh,
que
we
c'est
didn't
Pol Pot
have
qui a toute
anything
la
to do with it.
responsabilité.
We didn't
Nous
know. We
n'avions
didn't
rien à
have
voir
anything to
avec
do
tout
with it. It
cela.
was all Pol Pot that did this.
C'était Pol Pot.
But Pol Pot could not kill 2 million
Pol
people
Pot ne
by
peut pas
himself.
tuer 2 millions de personnes.
Pol
tout seul.
Pot could not run
Pol Pot
an
n'aurait pas
organization,
pu
a
gérer
state by himself,
l'organisation
an
et un
army
État
by
tout seul,
himself.
une armée
He
tout
could
seul.
only do it
Il
with
ne
the support
pouvait le faire
of an organization,
qu'avec
and
le
particularly the
soutien
senior
de
leadership.
l'organisation et
He couldn't have
des
done it
hauts dirigeants. Il n'aurait jamais pu
without
le
the
faire
support
autrement. Il n'aurait
of
pas
the
pu le
Central
faire
Committee
sans l'appui,
and the Standing
le
Committee.
soutien du comité permanent et du comité central.
If Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea believe that Pol Pot,
Si
they're
Khieu
now
Samphan et
saying
Nuon
Pol
Chea
Pot
pensent
killed people
que Pol Pot
against their
tué
wishes,
des gens,
that these
et que c'était
executions
contre
are
leur
something
volonté
that
que ces
shocked them.
exécutions étaient quelque chose qui
Why
les
is it
choquait.
they remained loyal to Pol Pot for another 2 decades?
Demeurés loyaux
For another
envers
2
Pol Pot pour
decades,
2
they remained
décennies
with
de
him,
plus. Pendant 20 ans,
supporting him.
ils sont restés avec lui et l'ont appuyé.
The fact is, these were the closest people to Pol Pot, his strongest
Il
supporters.
s'agissait de ses plus proches collaborateurs.
In facing genocide again,
Dans Facing Genocide,
Khieu Samphan
une fois de plus,
stated,
Khieu Samphan a
Pol
dit,
Pot was good at
Pol Pot
analyzing the situation.
était
I respected him a
bon
lot.
pour analyser les situations. Je le respectais beaucoup.
He then said, they demonize Pol Pot.
Il dit, ils ont
They accuse him of
vilifié
being a dictator
Pol
and
Pot.
use
Ils
the
l'ont
word
accusé d'être un
genocide.
dictateur
It's
et
not
employé
true.
le terme génocide. Ce n'est pas vrai.
A great leader of such a movement
Un grand
could
dirigeant
never
d'un
act
tel
like that.
mouvement ne
I
saurait
will
agir
shout
de
it
telle
out
façon.
at the trial.
On a-
That's what Khieu Samphan
crié
promised in
après moi.
2007,
pendant le procès. C'est ce que,
when he called
plutôt, je le
Pol
dirai
Pot a great
dans
leader.
le procès. C'est ce qu'il a dit en 2007, quand il a dit que Pol Pot était un grand dirigeant.
So I'd like to show you a little bit of a video
J'aimerais maintenant
where
vous montrer un
Khieu
extrait
Samphan was
vidéo
asked about
dans
Pol Pot
lequel
in
on
his
a posé une question
2007
à propos de
interview.
Pol Pot à Khieu Samphan en 2007.
constamment. Ici, au Canada, chose. Mais c'est l'homme, ça, j'ai son image.
I have an image of him in my head.
J'ai une image de lui dans ma tête.
Do you miss Pol Pot?
Est-ce que Pol Pot vous manque?
Yes.
Oui.
He had an exceptional mind.
Il avait un esprit exceptionnel.
For us.
Pour nous.
So it's clear that Khieu Samphan remained loyal to Pol Pot, at least up to 2007. But at the same time, he often tried to avoid responsibility by placing all the blame on Pol Pot alone. But he himself has acknowledged that that would have been impossible. In the VOA interview, Khieu Samphan said that Pol Pot was responsible for starvations and killings, but he could not do it alone. He also said, Khieu Samphan said, Pol Pot hunted down and made arrests with the participation of the Standing Committee. He never did anything alone. Nuon Chea was even closer to Pol Pot. He was his lifetime loyal deputy, and he continues to express great admiration for Pol Pot. He was Pol Pot's principal confidant. He was asked once, did Pol Pot keep his promise to always discuss with you what he wanted to do? And Nuon Chea answered, he did for the big issues. Issues were always cropping up. We just discussed whenever problems arose. He also was asked in this Enemies of the People, in the film with Tet Samba, did you and Pol Pot ever argue with each other when you were in government? And he answered, no. We didn't have any problems. Not between 1975 and 1979. I can't think of a single argument. So we've already heard that these killings were discussed in the Standing Committee. Khieu Samphan admitted that. And Nuon Chea says he never had any argument or any disagreement with Pol Pot. Nuon Chea was asked in this by Tet Samba, what did you think of Pol Pot's decision to kill all the traitors? And he answered, at the time I agreed. I just wanted to get the problem solved. It was the correct solution. Again, it's not our case that every single killing in a village was brought to the attention of these two accused or the senior leadership, that every single killing was a result of a direct order from the center, but they were all a result of the instigation, the policies of the center that were spread out to the cadre. It was a fundamental part of the Khmer Rouge doctrine. Even their anthem talks about blood turns to hatred. Khieu Samphan, in his speech on the second anniversary of the Khmer Rouge victory, 17 April 77, said, we must wipe out the enemy in our capacity as masters of the situation. In his speech the next year, to about 20,000 people in Phnom Penh, he said, only by implementing the party's line can we defend our country against internal and external enemies. And he told all those thousands of cadre present that they must subordinate all family and personal interests to the interests of the revolution. He told them, exterminate enemies of all stripes. And he told them, screen and exterminate all enemy elements within our ranks. Your Honors, I'd ask you to look at this remarkable document from the CPK Central Committee in March 1976. It talks about the right to smash. And we know, again, the vocabulary of the Khmer Rouge. Smash meant to kill. It talks about, number one, the right to smash inside and outside the ranks, within the party and those outside the party. And it gave that right to, it's in the base framework, you see the Zone Standing Committee, in the Central Office, the Central Office Committee, in independent sectors, the Standing Committee, in the center military, the general staff. So what is this? This is a license to murder. This is the party center licensing, encouraging the zones, the army, the sectors to carry out their policies to kill any perceived enemies, suspected enemies, in order to ensure the absolute implementation of the revolution. Now clearly, these are not the direct killers, nor was Pol Pot. Others carried out these massive crimes, these massive massacres of individuals. People like Tha Mok certainly committed many of the crimes, and you'll hear much evidence about his troops, not only within his own zone, but very importantly, being sent by the center to other zones to carry out these mass massacres and executions and killings. But was Tha Mok ever punished by the center? No, not at all. As time went by, as the killings increased, Tha Mok only remained in the very highest ranks of the party. Did Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea, the central senior leadership, did they care about the fact that ordinary people were being killed in villages for things like eating a banana that had fallen on the ground? They didn't care. Listen to the words of Nuon Chea.
We would investigate someone gradually until we knew his full background. Then it was often like looking for a needle in the sea. We did not arrest people randomly. People and I knew nothing about the ordinary people. But there were so many of them being brought in.
On ne connaissait rien du peuple ordinaire, mais ils étaient très nombreux à être arrêtés.
When did you realize that the villagers were being killed?
Quand vous êtes-vous rendu compte que les villageois étaient tués?
I can't really remember the exact moment.
Je ne me souviens pas vraiment du moment exact.
I just went on with my work and I did not jot it down.
J'ai continué à travailler, je ne l'ai pas noté.
I just went on with my work, and then he laughs.
J'ai juste continué à travailler.
He just went on with his work because the killings in the villages of ordinary people was a result of the policies that he had put in place. He, Pol Pot, Khieu Samphan, the senior leadership of the Khmer Rouge. Now, there's another excuse that Nuon Chea in particular likes to give to try to avoid his responsibilities. He wants to say that all the killings in the villages, all of the killings were done by enemies. If people were killed, it was by the Vietnamese and the CIA. So on the one hand, Nuon Chea admits to killing all the people that they believe were agents of the Vietnamese and the CIA. He says those traitors that they killed were all agents of the Vietnamese and CIA. And yet on the other hand, he states that those that did the killing were the Vietnamese and the CIA. It's a ridiculous, illogical lie. Instead of accepting responsibility, Nuon Chea's explanation for everything that went wrong and all of the suffering during the democratic Kampuchea period, the starvations, the killings, the enslavements, all of that was done by spies and traitors who were sabotaging the party. That's what he wants you to believe. As much as the central leadership tried to delude themselves about spies being everywhere, he wants you to be deluded also, and to believe that all around the country there were foreign agents and spies who were starving the people, and that's why there wasn't rice. But if half the Central Committee and the Standing Committee, who'd been purged by the central leadership during the decay period, if half of them had actually been spies for the CIA or the Vietnamese, how would the Khmer Rouge have won the war in 1975? The defense tries to use the fact that people oppose this regime, this wicked regime, to say, oh, because we had opponents, people who wanted to overthrow us, we were justified in killing these people. What good person would not oppose that regime? What good and brave person would not express some dissent to what was going on in democratic Kampuchea? But it was those good and brave people, and just ordinary people, that the Khmer Rouge targeted for killing, for starvation, for enslavement. They're trying now to use their unpopularity to justify the crimes that they committed. And this ridiculous idea that the CIA and the Vietnamese were working together is completely illogical to anyone who's aware of the history at that time. The United States and Vietnam had just fought a very long and bitter war. The United States was very much opposed to the Vietnamese communist government. They were enemies at the time. They were so opposed to the Vietnamese government that even after the fall of the Khmer Rouge in 1975, the American government, to the shame of many today, supported the Khmer Rouge maintaining their seat in the United Nations for many years. So it's of course ridiculous to believe that the CIA and the Vietnamese were cooperating and controlling everything in Cambodia. It was the accused, the senior leadership of the Khmer Rouge. Finally, Nuon Chea wants to say all the killings that we did do, that he does admit to, these senior leaders. He says we did this to protect Cambodia. But these killings were not done in battles. Those arrested and killed that he admits to, these are generally their own soldiers, including some of the best fighters that the Khmer Rouge had. And those starved and tortured and killed were ordinary Cambodians in the millions. So how did this protect Cambodia? Nuon Chea wants you to believe that those targeted were all enemies. S-21, we know about 12 to 16,000 were killed. These are, look at your screens, these are some of the photos of the enemies that the Patriot Khieu Samphan, and Nuon Chea had killed at S-21.
Les accusés, Khieu Samphan et Nuon Chea, ont fait exécuter à S-21.
How does killing children protect Cambodia? What's the truth about the democratic Kampuchea, the Khmer Rouge regime? The truth is what they did for Cambodia is they starved and weakened the people. They shrank the population by about a quarter. They destroyed the economy. They killed the most educated, the bravest of the Cambodians. They only weakened the country. And Cambodia is still suffering today from the effects of their regime. So who were these killings really designed to protect? In one statement that Nuon Chea wrote to the Danish Communist Party in July 1978, he wrote, "The leadership must be defended at any cost. There can be no comparison between losing 2 or 3 leading cadres and 200, 300 members. Better the latter than the former." So he says, again, what he was wanting to protect is himself the very senior leaders. They don't care if hundreds die, as long as they survive and have power. When the Vietnamese army was approaching Phnom Penh in 1979, did Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea pick up a gun and go to the front line and fight? No. They fled to the border, but not before Nuon Chea ordered Duch to kill all the remaining prisoners in S-21. These two men, Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea, are not patriots. Many people I know in Cambodia are hoping that they will hear an apology and the truth from these accused. I don't believe that they will hear that, but I do promise that we will show by the evidence the truth about what happened, and that these two men, Khieu Samphan and Nuon Chea, were among the most powerful figures in the senior leadership of the Khmer Rouge that was responsible for 3 years, 8 months, and 20 days of misery inflicted upon the Cambodian people. They're directly responsible for the approximately 2 million deaths that occurred, and this trial will prove their criminal responsibility.
The time is now appropriate for lunch adjournment. The chamber shall adjourn now and resume at 1:30 this afternoon. Security guards are now instructed to bring the co-accused, Mr. Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, to the holding cell downstairs and have them return to this courtroom before 1:30. The court is now adjourned. All rise.
Veuillez vous lever.